So this is not a happy situation. And how is it manifested? How is it manifested in ways that we see in this way? You get an intertwined set of security crises linking armed conflict, corruption, terrorism, organized crime swirling around. These are things that actually are the manifestations. And every single one of these things, under this, that, and this rubric, are things that UNODC is mandated to try to assist its member states to tackle in all their manifestations. All their manifestations. So that's the human security threat background that I wanted to share with you. It represents very forcefully my own perspective on the issue and what drives me to turn up to work every day and try to make sense of a lot of budgets and balance sheets and projects and implementation schedules and meeting this person and that person. Virtuous cycle, vicious cycle. So why do we need to be worried? I think that after the end of the Cold War, a lot of things started to accelerate. The movement of goods and people. Without two superpowers, they're kind of in some kind of horrible mutual blocking operation. You know, I remember the early 90s, a lot of us were euphoric. Certainly us in the UN, we thought we would now be able to do the kind of things that the UN was actually mandated to do, which was to save people and help people and, you know, humanitarian intervention, and we had a lot of things, and it stopped at, with Somalia. And things then started to get really complicated again. At the same time, another trend was happening, which was the encroachment. And I don't want to anthropomorphize this too much, but I think you started to see the encroachment on a lot of open spaces of transnational organized crime syndicates and groups that used the hemorrhage of weapons coming out of Russia and the Ukraine and other forms of openness and acceleration and started to make a lot of money. So we have well, I mean, I'm not going to read it out necessarily, but all of these things happening, open borders, huge increase in transactions. Later on in the slide I talk about crazy trade. Crazy. I mean, crazy in the sense that nobody's tracking what's happening, and on the oceans are basically so much is available to be shipped from one place to another. Take toxic waste, and who's tracking that? How do we know where it's going to end up, and how many kids are going to end up with mercury poisoning in Ghana if it docks there and somebody pays somebody else to put it in place, as an example. We were worried recently about ships containing toxic waste making their way into the Pacific. How do we keep control of this? How do we keep track of this? We haven't. Law enforcement, that's what that intends to say. Law enforcement has not kept pace. The symbiosis, as I just used the examples, weak governance, politics, it connects up. It certainly impedes development and is a greater threat to developing countries which don't have the infrastructure to resist. The infrastructure to resist the encroachment of organized criminal syndicates. I was also using yesterday an example. I'm from the island of Barbados, the Caribbean. And I remember in the late 80s, we were very much under threat from the movement of cocaine up from Venezuela and Colombia through the islands and up into the States, and to some extent off to Europe as well. We had the view that this was not necessarily a problem for us. It was a problem for wherever this market was wanting this product. And some people in the country thought we cannot assign our assets to deal with that too much because we have other things to be concerned about. And those who were warning that if you are running narcotics and you're paying off your couriers in drugs and not dollars, the couriers will want to find somewhere that they can liquidate that cocaine and get cash for whatever they want to do in their own country, so they will create a market. And somehow the spillover took place, and the islands were awash with problems. And it took a long time to fix that. Many of the islands were incapable of resisting that pressure. And there's a connection between vulnerability in small states, but even in larger states, if the institutions are not strong, it's going to be difficult to resist. So we had, and gradually, you know, sometimes if we're not on track with what problems we face, you get the sense that we have to be hit over and over and over on the head with an obvious thing to do before we actually wake up and say, maybe we should tackle this problem. 2004, UN High-Level Panel on Threats, Challenges and Changes. 2010 and so forth, we now starting to recognize transnational organized crime as a major threat. In Australia, I think a couple, 2-3 years ago, Prime Minister in one of the national policy statements on security starts to talk about transnational organized crime as a threat. Mr. Obama's recent speech and presentation on this issue talked about the same thing. And so this document, from the UN point of view, aims to try to do all of these things. And this is the kind of the cornerstone slide from this presentation, because it looks at a number of talk flows. I'll read at the bottom the type of things we're looking at: heroin, cocaine, firearms, counterfeit consumer goods, pharmaceuticals, timber, piracy. These types of things, which are not often analyzed and digested to the degree that's required. These manifestations of organized crime at the international level. In the presentation today, I will drill down into the issue of drug control in that country and in our region, and I'll talk a little bit about the timber trade in our region. Can't do it all, and I'd like to make some conclusory points that but I very strongly recommend you to, check it out. It's on the UNODC website, and it's I said yesterday that sometimes when I'm introducing UNODC documents, I say that, if you have problems sleeping, read the document. This is not one of them. This is I think well worth the effort. In terms of monetizing the assessment of the extent of the threat or of the crime flow, this is what our numbers and our number crunching has turned up. I dare say that when we get to our fourth and fifth iteration of this report, this will change around a little bit and not be possessed of some of the naivety that went into crunching the numbers. But I think as a sort of a splotch on a page that means something useful and more or less accurate, this is a good representation. If we were to put the value-added collective amount that is estimated to be the cost of corruption internationally on this, it would come, the range would be between 20 and 40 billion dollars. And there is an argument, and I have made the argument, for putting that on this. By comparison, you would see how it looks.